Did that just happen? Or did God kind of set things up to exalt himself? I can see how Lucifer would spin it, right? Now, before we go any further, one thing we cannot do. I am not trying to. I don't want you to think I'm trying to. If I am too close to it, out of kindness, you ought to come up here and tackle me or something and keep me from trying to do it, because it can't be done, okay? And that is this. It is impossible to explain the origin of sin so as to give a reason for its existence. Sin is an intruder, for whose presence no reason can be given. It is mysterious, unaccountable. To excuse it is to defend it. Could excuse for it be found, or cause be shown for its existence, it would cease to be sin. The Bible speaks of this as the mystery of iniquity. Perfect God, perfect universe, perfect heaven, perfect angels, imperfection. How did that happen? Guess what? You can't explain it, neither can I. It is the mystery of iniquity. And if we charge down that path thinking that we've got it all figured out, well, number one, we're wrong, and number two, we're on very dangerous ground. So I want to make that point. This is not what we're trying to do. Some things, human beings ought to just be smart enough to say, I'm not smart enough to figure that out. There are a number of things that fit in that category, in my opinion, but we're not going to go there right now. One of the most fundamental aspects of Lucifer's rebellion, the Spirit of Prophecy tells us, is a detail that is actually so common sense that people overlook it. And that is that it's universally true that when there is a rebellion or a revolution, at the heart of the concern or the objection of the revolutionary or rebellious party is the handling of the government that preceded them. Does that make sense? Somebody's not happy with the previous government's law or procedure. They're doing something we don't like. That's why there's a rebellion, right? And so it's not too surprising that from the very beginning of the great controversy in heaven, it has been Satan's purpose to overthrow the law of God. It's pretty obvious, actually, when you stop and think about it. So what did Lucifer find annoying? Were the tax rates too high? Traditionally, historically, anytime you get above about a 45 to a 50% taxation rate, you're going to have a rebellion. We've managed to avoid that in recent years in some countries by divvying the taxation out into 1 million different categories. It's quite a remarkable achievement, actually. But that wasn't the problem in heaven. Did he not like the mandatory military service? Oh, no, that really wasn't a thing either. Maybe he just didn't like the post office. No. What did he not like about the law of heaven? That's actually a very fundamental and very important question. What did he not like? So let's take a look at the law of heaven. To give is to live. That's one way that Ellen White describes the law of heaven. Here's another. The great law of life is a law of service. Self-sacrifice is the law of self-preservation. And the most intriguing one of these, self-renunciation is the great law of self-preservation. And self-preservation is the law of self-destruction. That's not the way the world works. That's what Lucifer was upset with. In effect, and these are my words, God basically said, I'll take care of you. I'll give you anything you need, everything you need, provided you spend your time and your energy helping everyone else. That's an important detail, because these 4 statements, they talk about giving and serving and sacrifice. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you're constantly giving away, you will eventually end up with nothing. Unless someone's providing what you need. And God said, I'll give you everything you need, as long as you use it to help others. And Lucifer said, I want to exalt my own throne. I don't want to spend my time working for other people, or angels, or whatever. And you could make a pretty good case for it, actually. You know, it's like, hey, why don't we get a little personal responsibility around here? You know what you need more than anyone else. You take care of yourself. I know what I need more than anyone else. I'll take care of myself. Well, I'll just kind of grow up a notch, and life will be better. That's not God's system, though. This is an amazing Bible verse. God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. Not for you, but for every good work. This is verse 8. I think it's like about verse 5 or 6, the one we quote somewhat commonly. God loves a cheerful giver. To me, this is a plain statement. God says, I'll give you everything you need for good works. And the Bible's pretty clear on what good works are. Good works are taking care of other people, especially the widow, the orphan, the needy, etc., etc. Lucifer didn't like this provision of God's law. Unselfishness, the principle of God's kingdom, is the principle that Satan hates. Its very existence he denies. Stop and think about that. Just stop there for a second. Its very existence he denies. He says there is no such thing as unselfishness. Everyone is selfish. Everyone takes care of themselves. Even God takes care of himself. How do you think he ended up at the top of the heap? From the beginning of the great controversy, he has endeavored to prove God's principles of actions to be selfish. To disprove Satan's claim is the work of Christ and of all who bear his name. How would you disprove the assertion that unselfishness does not exist? Too many negatives there. It's getting complicated. You know, Lucifer says there is no such thing as unselfishness. How are you going to disprove him? Yeah? If I said there's no such thing as pineapples, How would you prove me wrong? It's not complicated. You come up with a pineapple. It's not rocket science yet. We're going to get there, but it's not yet. Okay. How do you disprove the assertion that there is no such thing as unselfishness? Well, in order to pursue this topic a little bit more, we need to understand the enemy. There's a few things about Lucifer that are very helpful to figure out here. So we have this: the greatest talents and the highest gifts that could be bestowed on a created being were given to Lucifer, the covering cherub. Before his fall, he was a glorious being, occupying a position next to Christ. Okay, good. Just hang on to that. Lucifer was a covering cherub distinguished by his excellence. God made him good and beautiful, as near as possible like himself. Capital H. That's an interesting assertion right there. So the first thing to note is that Lucifer was made good. He was created with the greatest talents and the highest gifts. It was given to him, apparently, the moment he came into existence. That's the way he was. As near like God himself as possible. And so I want to introduce another thought that we'll come back to later on, because we kind of mislead ourselves by speaking in reasonable generalities, especially when we're talking to little children. We'll say, God can do anything. But no, he can't. So just working off of this statement, would it be possible for God to create an angel more like himself than Lucifer? Would that be possible? The statement says no. Well, anyhow, Lucifer was dealt a pretty good hand, if you don't mind a card-playing metaphor right there, you know. And when he came into existence, he had a pretty good hand of cards. But Lucifer chose to sin, and we're never going to know why he did that. We can't explain it. But there is one detail that we do know, which is fascinating, and that is that Lucifer's choice to sin and his rebellion came to a head about the same time as when God was getting ready to create our planet. When God said to his son, "Let us make man in our image," Satan was jealous of Jesus. He wished to be consulted concerning the formation of man, and because he was not, he was filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred. And that's an interesting little detail. He wished to be consulted concerning the formation of man. Why was that a big deal? Satan hates mankind because they are the workmanship of God. He opposed the creation of man. What is not the workmanship of God? Yeah. Hebrews tells us that God made all things, and all things were made by him. What is not the workmanship of God? But somehow, in some unique sense, Lucifer hates mankind because they are the creation of God. Now, I spent 20 years as an English teacher. And you know, we have grammar, and we have syntax, and we have definitions, and all those nice things. But we also have a category we call usage. Just the way a word is used. And so look at that last sentence right there. He opposed the creation of man. Now, the standard usage of those words implies something in regard to the timing of Lucifer's expression of concern. From that reading, would you say that his expression of concern was before or after Adam and Eve were created? Before. The word opposed, standard usage, implies pretty strongly this was before it happened. If it happened afterward, it would be more likely said something like Lucifer criticized the creation of man. So there's something going on here. Why? What was going on? Okay. And I asked a while ago, was there a connection between the creation of our earth and Lucifer's rebellion? And I'm going to say that I think that there's a very strong connection, yeah? So, we don't know when Lucifer first began to harbor selfishness. We don't know why. We'll never explain that, but he did. And so with the principle of selfishness in his heart, view it from that angle, these next few statements, okay? So here's Lucifer, still serving as a covering cherub, still leading the song service every time they get together for worship. But this rising tide of selfishness. Next to the angelic beings, the human family, formed in the image of God, are the noblest of his created works. Next to. Well, that's kind of an interesting little prepositional thing going on there. Next to the angelic beings. So are they on the right or the left? They're next to the angelic beings. Which side are they on? Well, neither, really. The earth was to be peopled with beings only a little lower than the angels. Oh, they're next to on the bottom side. Okay. Well, that's fine. That's pretty standard stuff. That's like Psalm 8, right? And Hebrews 2. Man was created a little lower than the angels. Look at this statement. No other creature God has made, is capable of such improvement, such refinement, such nobility as man. Man cannot conceive what he may be and what he may become. Through the grace of Christ, he is capable of constant mental progress. Now, that statement makes human beings sound kind of special. And I want you to notice some particular words. Improvement. Become. Progress. This is not a gift given fully formed at creation. This is an ongoing development. I just put these two statements in here because I want you to marvel at them the way I do, and I can't explain them. I don't really have a clue what's going on with this. You just take these in and think about them for yourselves, right? It was a wonderful thing for God to create man to make mind. God created man that every faculty might be the faculty of the divine mind. Precisely what that means, I will not even take a stab at. You can figure that out to the best of your ability. Man was the crowning act of the creation of God, made in the image of God and designed to be a counterpart of God. Man is very dear to God because he was formed in his own image. A counterpart. Interesting choice of vocabulary right there. Now, if Donald Trump, as the President of the United States, had a meeting with, and pardon my ignorance here, but the leader of Botswana, and I have no idea whether the leader of Botswana is a president or a prime minister, or what precisely the title might be. They would be counterparts. No one would think of them as equals, but they would be counterparts. They are each the leader of their country. And that's as far as I can go in trying to make any sense out of that statement. Well, let's go on. My point is simply this. There's something special about human beings. God would place man upon probation to test his loyalty before he could be rendered eternally secure. If he endured the test wherewith God saw fit to prove him, he should eventually be equal with the angels. Now remember, we're analyzing these statements from the perspective of the selfish heart of Lucifer. Is this a problem? Is this reason to object to the creation of man? Those who in the strength of Christ overcome the great enemy of God and man will occupy a position in the heavenly courts above angels who have never fallen. What happened to a little lower than? The work of redemption involved consequences of which it is difficult for man to have any conception. There was to be imparted an excellency of power which would place him higher than the angels who had not fallen. Now, I'm going to suggest that to the selfish heart of Lucifer, this would not have been a welcome development. Okay. We need to know a little bit more about Lucifer, though. God was a light so effulgent. Now, that's a great word. Like I say, I spent 20 years teaching English. I like vocab. It's fun. You know, it's good to have nice words, right? How many of you have rattled off the word effulgent in the last week? It's not in our top 25 these days. Okay. Does anybody know what it means? Fortunately, it's pretty simple. It means really, really bright. That's all it means. It's really, really bright. God was a light so bright that Lucifer occupied the position of covering cherub so that the universe could at all times look upon his glory. Covering cherub somehow made it possible for the universe to look upon his glory. He who was once the covering cherub, whose work it was to hide from the heavenly intelligences the glory of God, perverted his intellect and divorced himself from God. That was Lucifer's primary job description. He was the covering cherub. He was also the choir director, right? But he was the covering cherub. That was his job. Now consider this last little statement right here. Adam and Eve were granted communion with their Maker with no obscuring veil between. What was going to happen to Lucifer's job if that idea ever caught on? Well, I'm going to skip over that screen. We'll just go on to this one. So maybe those wrong-headed concerns help explain this statement. The creation of our world was brought into the councils of heaven. There, the covering cherub prepared his request that he should be made prince to govern the world then in prospect. That's a bit of an archaic usage. Today we would say then in the planning stages. Lucifer wanted to be in charge of us. Don't make them God. I object to the plan. But if you insist on making them, at least put me in charge. I can save you some trouble. This was not accorded him or granted to him. Jesus Christ was to rule the earthly kingdom. Under God, he engaged to take the world with all its probabilities, and I believe that includes the probability of sin. The law of heaven, to give is to live, should be the standard law for this new world, for human intelligences. Lucifer was jealous of Christ, and his jealousy worked into rebellion, and he carried with him a large number of the holy angels. Okay, so that gives us a little background, a little understanding of the perspective that Lucifer brings to this whole discussion. Now, we need to understand what's at the very heart of sin. Now, this is where, again, we will never be able to explain the origin. I'm not interested in the origin. I am interested in what happened 1 second later. Does that make sense? Follow me. I just caught my eye, and you may be seeing these little initials and numbers in the book, or in the screen there, just to explain. I often use these teaching classes, and these are references to 2 of my books that this material is based on. So that would be Diasozo chapter, or page 23 is what that means. So, it's irrelevant for us, but just so you don't have to try to decipher the meaning of it, it means nothing to you at this point. Okay, so at the very core of Lucifer's rebellion, not the origin of sin, but the rebellion that followed, there's one very simple, very immensely important issue. Once upon a time, probably for the 10 millionth time, but one particular time, God said, Lucifer, please do this. Now, I have no idea how many requests God had made of Lucifer previous to this. I presume there were many. Please do this. But this time, for the first time, when God said, please do this, there had to be a first time. Lucifer thought, no, that's better. There had to be a first time. When you go from no such thing exists to such a thing exists, there had to be a beginning of it. We can't answer the question of why he did that, where that thought came from. I'm not trying to. But it does tell me 2 important things about his mind already at that stage. If God said, do this, and he said, no, that's better, in order to get to that point, one of 2 things had to have already happened. Either Lucifer believed that God had made a mistake. Maybe that's how it was. It's like, Lucifer, please do this. I don't believe it. It's amazing. It's astounding. God has always been so smart. But this time it's like, that's obviously better. And he goofed. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know. But that would be a way to get from doing what God said to saying something else is better, is to say, well, God's made a mistake. If it wasn't that, the story turns darker. Because if God didn't make a mistake, it meant he knew what he was doing. And if he knew what he was doing, and this was not as good as that, It meant that God had deliberately commanded something that was not in Lucifer's best interest. That's what happens when you lose faith in God. It's kind of a big thing. I love this quote. Faith is a very simple matter. It is confidence in God. That's it. We're over. Yeah. Done. Faith is a very simple matter. It is confidence in God. There is an interesting flip side to this statement, though. What is it to be in an unsaved condition? Is it not to be living without that full confidence in God, which is born of love, which leads us to take him at his word? That's an unsaved condition. To be living without full confidence in God. So now we can summarize those two statements. Getting a little analytical here. Faith equals confidence. Right? Faith is a very simple matter. It's confidence in God. That's pretty straightforward. Unsaved equals no confidence. Now, how many of you took an algebra class at one point? I used to teach algebra too. I taught all sorts of things. It was fun. Now, there's this neat little trick you can do in algebra where you can multiply both sides of an equation by -1, and all it does is change the signs. Do you remember that? You know, right? Just change the signs, and it's still an equation. So we've got unsaved equals no confidence. So if we multiply both sides of that equation by a -1, we get this. Saved equals confidence. Okay. How many of you took a geometry course? Do you remember the theorems? Or not theorems, what do they call them? I'm forgetting the right term. Anyhow, the things you build everything off of. Maybe it's theorems. Maybe that's the right word. Anyhow, there's one that I always enjoyed, just because it sounded like you didn't have a clue what you were talking about. You know, equals equal to equals are equal. Right? Remember that one? So it goes like this. If two things are equal to the same thing, they're equal to each other. So if faith equals confidence and saved equals confidence, faith equals saved. Which kind of has a biblical ring to it, actually. I like it when math actually works in the real world, okay? So, if faith equals saved, it really shouldn't be too surprising, because righteousness is by faith, right? I remember reading that someplace. Unsaved equals no faith. Now, this one is actually maybe the more interesting equation. And this is the one that leads most directly to the diagnosis that we were working towards. Remember, we were going to try and figure out the true character of the disease, the true nature of the disease, the diagnosis. If unsaved equals no faith, what kind of a disease are we talking about? What category of disease does this fall into? Think hard. Don't be afraid to speak up. What's that? Terminal. That's a great answer. That is a great answer. It's not the one I was after, but it's absolutely a great answer. It's a category of disease. Yeah, some terminal is a good one, but no, different. Before we get there, let's try a few examples. You ever hear of scurvy? How do you get scurvy? Poor health? Well, yeah. Kind of produces it. What was the causative factor in scurvy? It's a lack of vitamin C. Yeah. Ever hear of rickets? Comes from a lack of vitamin D. Ever hear of beriberi? Comes from a lack of one of the B vitamins. I don't remember which one. The one that's in rice husks. Have you, now, hey, we got some vegetarians in the crowd here. You ever heard of pernicious anemia? What's that come from? A lack of B12. What category of diseases are these? Come on, say it boldly. What's that? Deficiency diseases. Sin is a deficiency disease. How do you treat scurvy? Give them vitamin C. That's why the British sailors are still called limeys, right? How do you treat rickets? Sunshine. It's probably the best answer, yes. Okay. Or a vitamin D supplement. How do you treat beriberi? How do you treat pernicious anemia? Well, you can't really reverse it, they say, but what do you do to stop it anyhow? Methyl, okay. You don't like the cyano? Yeah, it has cyanide in it, so yeah, okay, we'll go with the methyl. That's fine. A deficiency disease is treated by providing what you're deficient in. Sin is a deficiency disease. The necessary treatment is faith. I'm going to skip over, I'll go through this and then we'll skip over a bunch of other pages real fast. So, an interesting question is, how did Lucifer deceive a third of the angels? And these are explicit tactical maneuvers or methods that Lucifer used in heaven, right? He exploited his position and the trust of the angels as long as possible. He would hide intentions from others, just not bring it up, or if necessary, he would lie about it. He would imply or insinuate without clear assertions. He would distort others' perceptions. He would maintain plausible deniability. Everybody know what that term means? Plausible deniability? Let me just illustrate. Let's just pretend, for the moment, with no bearing on reality, this is entirely hypothetical, pretentious, okay? Let's say I'm the President of the United States. And let's say there's somebody I really, really don't like very much. And my life would just be easier if his life ended. But that would be unseemly for the President of the United States to order someone murdered. That's just, it's just not a good thing. And so the concept is that the President would work down about 4 layers in the hierarchy of administration there in the executive branch, and he'd have a chat with somebody down a few layers and say, I'm not a big fan of John Doe. And, man, There are times when I wish he'd commit suicide. Are you listening? Not talking to you. It's the president talking to the guy. Are you listening? Oh, yeah. Yes, Mr. President. So then this guy who's 4 layers down, he goes and figures out a few other people, and somehow the guy that the president doesn't like decides to hang himself or jump out of a tall building. It's remarkable, the people who jump out of tall buildings and hang themselves. More so in other countries. It's remarkable how many bankers have done that lately. It's really strange. It's also remarkable how many naturopathic doctors have suddenly developed suicidal tendencies. I don't know if you've followed that count, but it's up over 70 now, I believe, in the last about 10 years. Really strange how that happens. But as president, I had nothing to do with it. Talk to my chief of staff. Did I ever order, no, I never heard anything. Talk to my second chief of staff. No, I never heard anything. Talk to my third chief of staff. No, I never heard anything. No. That's plausible deniability. I didn't have anything to do with it. My hands are clean. I don't know why he decided to commit suicide. Okay, moving on. He would shift responsibility to others. He would abandon discredited positions without accepting responsibility for having advocated them, right? So he says, oh, this is my plan, and somebody shows an obvious reason why that's a terrible plan. You don't spend your time defending the plan, you drop it, and you never mention it again. Cite supporters as evidence of correctness and appeal to sympathy. Lucifer used all these methods. And if by chance you're looking at that list and you're thinking, wow, that sounds like politics. Yeah, you're right. Well, let's go on. This one, I'm going to go through these really rapidly because I just don't want to take the time with them right now. That one said that he took advantage of the loving, loyal trust. Okay, that was fine. Down at the bottom, while secretly fomenting discord and rebellion, he with consummate craft caused it to appear as his sole purpose to promote loyalty and to preserve harmony and peace. That's nice. He was very cunning. All he claimed was he wanted to bring in a better order of things, to make great improvements. Just trying to make the place better. He could present no defined reasons as to why he wished the law of God changed. He simply said, well, I'll be better off if it is. Yeah, that was simple. He gained sympathy, thoughts of criticism. Oh, this is the one thing that Ellen White spends more time on in this arena than anything else. Lucifer would come around and he would talk to an angel or a group of angels, and he would implant some little doubt. Now, I'm assuming that angels have decently high IQs, so I think that this doubt had to be very, very subtle. And then he'd just go his way, and he'd come back around later. I'm always fascinated by the time frame that applies in this. Was it like, the next week? Maybe it was 80 years later. I don't know what the time frame in this whole thing is, but he'd come back around later, and he would re-engage this same angel or group of angels in conversation, and he would lead them right up to the point where he had implanted the doubt and say, well, what do you think? And they'd never thought any of this before. And the only thing that they could pull out of anywhere was this doubt that he had put in their mind 80 years before, or whatever. And they'd say, well, maybe it's... And now it came out of their mouth. There's a strange thing. When we hear, I think that our brains are wired somewhat like the angels. I think there's some similarity. When we hear something come out of our mouth, our brain says, we must believe that. That's why debates are such a bad idea. Arguing, I'm debating and I'm arguing something I don't believe at all, but that's a dangerous thing. Okay, let's go on. Words have power to react on the character. That's men are influenced by their own words. That applies to us too. Just go ahead. And we can go, this is good. This is shifting responsibility. In his interview, views, plural, with other angels, after succeeding in finding sympathizers, he arranged his arguments and presented them as if they were the sentiments that had originated in the minds of those whom he first led astray. These are your ideas. I'm just trying to help you clarify your own ideas. Oh, thank you. Okay. The tempter would throw all the blame of his course upon others who were below him. He would make it appear that if he could have moved according to his own judgment, all this demonstration of rebellion would have been avoided. Well, that's slick. Okay. The influence of mind on mind. So strong a power for good when sanctified is equally strong for evil in the hands of those opposed to God. This power Satan used in his work of instilling evil into the minds of the angels, and he made it appear that he was seeking the good of the universe. That's what it looked like. That expression, the influence of mind on mind, that's an expression that Ellen White used to describe both good and bad influences. When she spoke about the evil kind of influences, though, she often used two additional terms that kind of came and went during her lifetime. We don't use them so much anymore. But she often spoke of mesmerism and mind cure. We don't really use those expressions the same way anymore. But from 1901 onward, she often used the more modern term of hypnotism. The devil likes to make hypnotism look like a joke, some sort of a TV comedy kind of a thing. But just for the record, hypnotism is no joke. Let's go on. Satan was artful in presenting his side of the question. As soon as he found that one position was seen in its true character, he changed it for another. That's the switching things along. Everybody agrees with me. I'm going to move on. When it was announced that with all his sympathizers he must be expelled from the abodes of bliss, Satan and his hosts threw the blame of their rebellion wholly upon Christ, declaring that if they had not been reproved, they would never have rebelled. Don't play word games with me. You were reproved because you were rebelled. It's amazing, the stuff that, the illogical, nonsensical stuff that political leaders can pass off onto people. Lucifer cast the cause of his defection upon Jesus Christ and upon God. If they had not so firmly resisted his plans, he would not have gone on doing as he did. You ever heard of Newton's second law? An object in motion will continue in motion in the same direction at the same rate until some other force acts upon it. Lucifer apparently is not a big fan of physics. Wrongdoers always find sympathizers, and Satan so represented his case to the angels that he drew many angels from their allegiance to God. It is impossible for man to measure the ingenuity shown by Satan in deceiving human minds. Don't ever think you're smart enough. Don't gamble on it. This next statement is, to me, the absolute ultimate proof that I do not want to go up against the devil myself. Lucifer's work of deception was done in so great secrecy that the angels in less exalted positions supposed that he was the ruler of heaven. And interestingly enough, see that capital H on he? That's in the original source. But it's talking about Lucifer. I don't know if Ellen White did that intentionally or if that was a mistake, some copy editor or typesetter, I don't know, but that's in the original. Okay, we've got to go on. If you're going to have an argument, you have to have something to argue over. So once upon a time, I had this really naive little thought. I said, I wonder what the great controversy is all about. What are we arguing about? You know, I mean, two guys who disagree could stand there and slap each other in the face all day long. You know, the car is red, the car is blue, the car is red, the car is blue. Okay, well, why don't you just walk out to the garage and look at the car? You know? Figure out what you're arguing about and do something intelligent. And so I thought, you know, this is an interesting question. So I don't know if you've worked with the Ellen G. White search program and whatnot, but you can use what they call Boolean logic. If you're familiar with that, you're good. You'll understand what I'm talking about. If it doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. Just have a happy day anyhow. But you can make these very convoluted, logical search criteria. And so I put together this search. I wanted every reference to Lucifer, archangel, covering cherub, arch-apostate, great rebel, you know, everything that said anything about Lucifer. I wanted everything that said anything about the law, the government, the jurisdiction, the whatever else of heaven, the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. I put all those terms in. I wanted everything that had anything to do with complaint or accusation or criticism or fault finding, or I wanted to know what the complaints were. And I put this whole big search together, and then you hit the enter button, and now computers are really great for some things. And I came up with, I think it was about 146,000 paragraphs from the Spirit of Prophecy to go through. And it took me a year. But I did it. I'll confess, I skimmed some, you know. I wanted to find out what were the accusations. Now, when I started on that, I honestly probably, if you'd asked me, I don't remember really thinking about it too clearly, but if you'd asked me, I probably would have said, well, there must be dozens of accusations. But there aren't. I don't think, anyhow. They're worded in many different ways in Ellen White's writings. But in my assessment, and you might have a little different spin on it, and that's fine, but as near as I can tell, they fit into 9 categories, very, very nicely, very simply, into 9 specific categories. And so then, actually, about a dozen years later, I went back to that, and I said, I want to find out the chronological order. I want to see the development of this argument in heaven. So I spent another couple of months wading through all that. And so this next screen is going to be my best effort to reconstruct the arguments that Lucifer used in the order that Lucifer used them. Okay? I'm not claiming it's perfect. It's the best I know how to do. What were the accusations? Number 1, angels are holy by nature and wise enough to govern themselves, so they don't need God's law. We're good. We've grown up. We've got this now. Thank you, God. It's been a wonderful start, but we can handle it. Now, it's interesting. Before we go there, I should say, in the chronological development of things, as soon as Lucifer began to spread this idea, God the Father did something very interesting. He said, okay, we all need to get together. I've got an announcement to make. And that's when there was this great meeting, and he said, this is my son. Jesus is my son. He is equal with me. If he says something, it's like I said it. If he does something, it's like I did it. Now, it intrigues me that there was ever any need for a statement of that nature. Wasn't that something they'd known forever? And apparently not. Apparently not. I have a guess. This is not too important, but I'll toss it out. My guess, and I can't support this, so I can't prove it, it's just a guess. My guess is that up until that time, Jesus had lived as an angel among angels, just as he was one day to live as a man among men. And so I think that's my guess as to why there was ever any need for clarification. But that's what happened immediately after that first accusation. Angels, we're good. We can handle this. This is my son. Lucifer's second accusation, God was unfair when he exalted Jesus above Lucifer. Okay. That didn't go down well with Lucifer. That was unfair. You know, Jesus has got some good points. I've got some good points. If anybody's going to get a raise, I think it ought to be me. That's, it's pretty simple. Third accusation, third complaint. The plan to create human beings is a big mistake. Don't do it. Just don't do it. God said he was going to anyhow, and so that leads kind of logically into number 4. God's just selfish, and he's unforgiving and revengeful. Now, bear in mind that as Lucifer's spreading these ideas, there's a huge amount of confusion in the minds of the angels. What is forgiveness? We've never seen anyone forgiven. What is revenge? We're not even sure what that means. There are some weird circumstances. God's law is defective and needs to be changed. But he couldn't say what the change was going to be. He just said it needs to be changed. Remember that statement we looked at a while ago? I can imagine at this stage, angels basically saying, but Lucifer, we've been keeping God's law for like forever. How is it defective? And the next accusation, I put human beings. Of course, human beings were not yet created at this point, but I stuck them in there. But the accusation was, nobody can keep that law. It's impossible to keep that law. And the angels were confused. And here is a little bit of speculation on my part. I want to warn you. I don't have a direct spirit prophecy, thus saith the Lord, that nails this thought down. What she does say at this point in the narrative is that Lucifer took advantage of his high position and the influences that carried with the lower angels. Well, how would he do that? And so here's my speculation. This is my guess. I'm guessing that basically what he did was he said, oh, you are so naive. You think you've been keeping that law, but wait till he throws the book at you. What? I sit on the high council. You don't really know how things work. Trust me. Now we're talking about a law where, I don't know if the punishment had been pronounced at that point, but we're talking about a law that carries the punishment of death, which again, they didn't understand what death was either, so it's all very mysterious. But it does sound serious. And you're telling me that I haven't kept the law? They had no way of fact-checking that at all. So let me illustrate that briefly. Let's just pretend that tomorrow, big headlines in the newspaper, the Oregon, what do you have, state police or highway patrol, or what do you have something down here, I'm sure? State police, okay. The Oregon State Police have forced, no, it's not arbitrary, and no, it's not impossible. There's a Bible verse for that, by the way. And at this point, Lucifer throws his hands up in holy horror and says, God, you're just lying about everything. And those are the 9 accusations. And we're going to close with that, but I want to leave you with a little homework. If you were counseling God at this particular point, what would you tell him to do? The highest angel in heaven has just leveled 9 accusations, and nobody in heaven can prove them right or wrong. What would you tell God to do? And we will close with that. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Father, we're thankful for the incredible gift of sacred history, for information on things that happened long ago, long before we were around. We would know nothing of these affairs if you had not worked to inform us. And so we thank you for that. We pray you'll go with us. It is a Sabbath evening. We've spent our time. It has hopefully been mentally invigorating and a blessing in some way. I pray you'll give safety to each one as they travel home. Bring us back tomorrow morning. May we find a blessing in understanding your plans. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.